And Jacob, okay? Sarah is at the playground with her son, Jacob, on a beautiful summer day just like today. And she's pushing her son, Jacob, on the swings when she thinks she hears a faint sound of music off in the distance. And then the sound starts to grow a little bit louder, as if it's drawing closer. And the music, it keeps repeating the same two lines of a song. And now Jacob has perked up as well, and he's starting to notice this music. And as he starts to put two and two together, a vehicle pulls up and stops right in front of the playground. Just as Jacob, from the swing, announces for the whole neighborhood to hear, "It's the ice cream truck!" Yes. Sarah takes Jacob out of the swing and tells him, "Hey, just play here in the sandbox while I go and get you some ice cream." And at this point, a line had formed in front of the truck, so it takes Sarah a couple of minutes. But when she finally gets to the front, orders the ice creams, and gets back to the sandbox to present one to her son, Jacob, she finds that Jacob's entire mouth is filled with sand. Sarah's grossed out, but she also notices the irony of it all. She was hoping to give her son a gift, a treat, something delicious, and instead, her son has filled his mouth with sand from the sandbox at the public park. I'm beginning with this silly story today because I think it exemplifies our human predicament. Jesus wants to give us a gift, and we, like Jacob, always seem to find a way to ignore the gift and choose something much worse instead. That reading from Ephesians that Tom just read for us talks about one of the gifts that Jesus is trying to bring us. That reading said that Jesus' purpose was to create in himself one new humanity, thus making peace. And it said, we are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people. This is part of the gift that Jesus is trying to give the world, and instead, it seems we always choose division and arguments and hatred and bigotry. Division and societal barriers, these are not the gifts that Jesus came to bring. No, in fact, it's the exact opposite of that. Jesus' ministry was constantly revealing a breaking down of barriers so that all the world could be united under God's banner of love. I want to take us through the gospel reading for this morning and show you what I'm talking about, because this reading does a great job of exemplifying a lot of our themes here. This is a story from John 4 that really showcases all the types of barriers that Jesus crosses in order to bring all of the world into this new vision of what life could be. Feel free to follow along with the reading in your bulletin. It'll also appear on the illustrator behind me. We're just going to take it one section at a time. So starting there, John chapter 4, verse 1. Now Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was gaining popularity and baptizing more disciples than John, although in fact it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. So Jesus left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. In these first few verses of our reading, we learn that Jesus is gaining in popularity. His message is spreading, and the Pharisees don't like it. The Pharisees, as you might know, were the keepers of the law. They were the ones who put up and maintained all of the neat and tidy religious barriers at that time. But we're told at the start of this passage that Jesus leaves Judea, where the Pharisees were, and he heads instead to Samaria, to enemy territory. Jesus is leaving behind the Pharisees and their restrictive laws, and he's crossing borders and boundaries into Samaria, into the place where the Jews should not go. In these first few verses, we see that Jesus is not a man focused on maintaining barriers. Let's keep that in mind as we look at what happens next. We continue with verse 6. Jacob's well was there in the town, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. This whole event here probably seems a little unremarkable. Jesus is at a well, a woman comes to the well, and so Jesus asks her for a drink of water. But this is actually an incredible moment, because the Jewish religious laws at that time said that Jews like Jesus could not talk with Samaritans, and that men should not talk with women of a foreign tribe. But it's also even more remarkable because we're told that it all happens at noon. Jesus was at the well during the hottest part of the day. It's a time when no one in their right mind would have normally gone to draw water. And so we know that this Samaritan woman who's there bringing water from the well, she's there because she didn't want anyone else to see her. She's drawing water at noon because she's too ashamed to have to interact with her fellow Samaritans. And look now at what happens next. The Samaritan woman said to Jesus, "You are a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Jesus wants to give this woman a gift. He's not focused on the religious and societal barriers. He wants to share with this woman the gift of living water. But she doesn't know how to accept it because she's so focused on the barriers. Look what happens next. "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." You're not thinking correctly, Jesus says. You're so focused on the barriers of having a bucket deep enough for the well's temporary water that you're missing the eternal gift I'm trying to share with you. And you know, we fall into this trap as well all the time. We get caught up in the minor practical barriers rather than having faith to trust in God's greater plan. We hold back from sharing our faith, fearing we won't have the right words or will be rejected. We stress over the logistics of getting everything perfect for a family gathering, and in so doing lose sight of the deeper importance of relationships and love. We hesitate to reach out to a neighbor in need because we're concerned about what others might think or the inconvenience it might cause us. Like the woman at the well, we focus on the tangible, the immediate, the temporary. And in so doing, we ignore the life-giving gifts that Jesus is trying to give us. Just like you and me, the woman at the well persisted in her struggle to understand the gift that Jesus was giving. In verse 15, she says this, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." Jesus told her, "Go, call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." "Woman," Jesus replied, "believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. You see, the gift that Jesus is trying to bring is the gift of broken down barriers. He's bringing about a world where everyone, not just the Jews in Jerusalem, but everyone will worship God in spirit and truth. Jesus is inviting this woman into his vision for a new humanity, where there are no more foreigners and strangers, but only fellow citizens of God. Even though this woman is a Samaritan, even though she was a political enemy, even though her society considered her sexually unclean because of her divorces and her current relationship outside of marriage. Despite all of this, Jesus saw her as a part of his grand vision for a new, united world. He saw her as a neighbor in need of love. We've been talking all month long about Jesus' command to love our neighbor. It's a statement that's so clear and straightforward, and yet for 2,000 years, humans have found all sorts of ways to ignore this gift, to rationalize behaviors that prevent us from actually following the commandment. Love your neighbor, Jesus says, and we reply, but what about their immigration status? Love your neighbor, Jesus says, and we reply, but what about their sexual orientation? Love your neighbor, Jesus says, and we reply, but what about their political views? Well, as the saying goes, what would Jesus do? We see it here today. Jesus would share the gift of living water with a sinful and ashamed Samaritan woman because to Jesus, despite it all, she was still his neighbor in need of love. She was still part of Jesus' mission for a united new humanity. The truth is, all our barriers that we keep clinging to, they actually just harm us. Do things seem better nowadays? Now that we're polarized and walled off and refusing to listen to someone with a different political ideology? Are things better nowadays now that we shame and cancel people for mistakes they've made years ago? You see, when Jesus commands us to love our neighbors, that command itself is a gift that he's trying to give us. Jesus wants to create a better world, a new humanity, where all people are united in neighborly love. His whole life and mission and death and resurrection are a gift for us that Jesus hopes we'll accept. His expansive, radical, sacrificial love for us is our gift. I'm giving you a new commandment, Jesus said during his final meal. You are to love one another as I have loved you. Jesus' love for us is what frees us and inspires us to go out and love our neighbors. This is the gift that we as Christians have been given. And accepting this gift and following Jesus' example of neighborly love really can heal our broken world. May it be so. May it be so. Amen.